Good morning, I'm Ian from Warrender Technical Solutions. Now, the whole point of these morning catch-ups, these weekly catch-ups, is so that you get to know me. Because when you hire Warrender Technical Solutions, it's me that you're getting through the door. It's me you're going to be talking with throughout the project. And so it's important that I am open with you with some of my thoughts, some of my ideas. Most weeks, we're talking at least one business topic, something to do with automation or processes. But occasionally, because I need you to get to know me, because I'm the face of the brand, some weeks I'm going to go off piece a little bit and not talk too much about business. And this is one of those weeks. There will be some talk a bit later about AI. And not so much in business, just more general where we are with AI, especially with events at the weekend. And I will be talking a bit about my weekend, what I thought of Scream. But I'm going to start with a little bit of a rant. So for those who don't want that, at the bottom of the screen now is some timestamps. So you can jump straight to the weekend Scream conversation. You can jump straight to the AI conversation, and you can miss out my opening rant, because my Sunday morning started early. My son had a football game out west, and it was a 9 o'clock kickoff, 8:30 meet. So it was 7:10. It was early, and one of the first things my son says to me on Sunday morning is, "Have we started World War III?" Initially opened up with a bit of history lesson for him, that it's often you name these things after the event or towards the end of the event. I mentioned that in World War II, although World War II was a name used in some publications very early on. It wasn't until 1941 when Roosevelt used it in a speech that it became more commonly used, and that was still across in the Americas. Here in Britain, it was known as the war, or the war over in Europe, for most of the 1939 through to towards the end of the war. And that naming convention started changing when we started doing more joint operations with Americans, who by 42, 43, we're using World War II quite commonly. And so when we'd start doing joint operations with Americans, we started using that naming convention ourselves. And then after the war, that was really when the Great War became known regularly as World War I, and the War of Europe became commonly used as World War II. We talked about how there's lots of years that we could have assigned to the starting of World War III, be that 2001, 2022, and how this is more of a extension of a resource conflict that goes back several years. But once I got past the dry history lesson, it was frustrating that we even had to have the conversation. He's 13, he's asking questions about the world, it's quite usual. But it's frustrating that we're having these conversations, because I grew up in the 80s. And the 80s, we'd solved war. In the 80s, the big things that we were trying to fix was famine and AIDS. Yes, there was fighting in certain parts of the world, but they didn't really affect daily conversations. In the 80s, the Cold War was coming to an end. So the risks that we had in the 60s and 70s about nuclear strikes, that was going. And as I've got older, it's becoming increasingly obvious that the peace that I have had in the early part of my life, global peace, and the end of some of the global wars that really came to an end with the Iraq War and the first Iraq War in the 90s. That was all because of a group of people before me that created some rules, and people followed those rules because not following them would create some type of chaos that no one wanted to go down. But there isn't 5 big people sitting outside the system, say a multi-billionaire a person that done the most for charity, a scientific mind, the greatest scientific mind of our time, somebody to do with the climate. We haven't got 5 people that we've all decided these are the governing 5 people who sit above these rules. These rules only existed because people didn't want the risk of not following them and the chaos that would cause. Until more recently, we had the Second Iraq War that kind of pushed at the boundaries of those rules. But even then, there was a pretense of following the rules, because not following the rules creates a certain type of chaos. And now we're in a world where one of the main players isn't following those rules. One of the main players is going, I'm too big for this. I don't need to do that. And that chaos, that is the one thing that's been holding people back from doing what's been happening in the past 6 months with the going into Venezuela, and before that, what's been happening in Gaza, with people not following those rules, and everyone else going, if I now step up and I challenge what they're doing, I'm going to have bigger problems because of where they are on the global stage and the position that puts on me in the global stage. And I know that I am very lucky that I get to do my problem solving, I get to do my process and systems because of the broad piece that chaos risk has allowed me. But now, with this glorious sunrise behind me, I do wonder about how close we are to total chaos. And I'm not sure we'll ever call it World War III. It's just going to be a chaotic war around resources. I know we can make pretenses, and we have in the past, but really this is a discussion about resources and who has them and who protects them and everything else in between. I'm not saying that the guy in Iran was a nice guy. I am saying that he was never on an international trial for his crimes, that he was never convicted directly. Yes, there was lots of UN sanctions against him, and there's lots of evidence out there, but we can't decide unilaterally that someone's a bad person and that we're going to take them out, and then without any plan what we do afterwards, without, talk about business planning. You don't just change your board of directors without some sort of a plan of what that new board of directors are going to do. And there is a huge risk for us all that this lovely, calm peace that I had in the 80s and that's been slowly eroding is just going to turn into chaos. They were talking about £1,000 drones that were designed and made in Iran, that you need a multi-million-pound missile to shoot them down. With that economy of scale, that's a really interesting direction that we're heading, because you can mass produce these drones. You can send them to lots of places to get the missiles to shoot them down. That's going to cost a lot of money, and we're already in a situation on the edge of a global recession and a global war, which is where we're heading with this. It's not good, and the winners are only going to be people like China, who have put themselves in a position where they can outlast a economic downturn and also profit from a global war. So that was my Sunday morning. I just frustrated that the direction we're heading and how powerless I am to do anything directly about it. How powerless I think we are as a country to do anything meaningful around it. We can make statements, we can tell people they can use our base, not use our bases, but other than regime change in USA, which would cause a few problems, I think we're just at the whim of other people at the minute. So I did go, and before all that chaos started on the Saturday and the conversations on the Sunday, I did go and see Scream 7 on the Friday, my wife's birthday. It was a very good day. I enjoyed Scream 7 a lot. My wife has always had an issue with legacy series that keep going on, And I have heard a few other people that were like, the twist was disappointing because of who was involved in the twist. I get what my wife and others are saying, but it's so hard in a legacy series to have enough people to not make that twist disappointing in the way that people saw it. I personally found that the use of AI to bring back some of that legacy anniversary type feel to it, and it was what I expected, which I think was the biggest difference between my wife and myself, that it wasn't the twist, the reveal for me, that was what was interesting. It was the journey to the reveal, because the reveals in all these films, when we went to see Final Destination last year, really what these films are is setting up a series of set pieces, and it's a series of set pieces that's the important bit, and the journey towards the end, I know that that's important to some people, but it's difficult, especially when that they want to make an eighth, and so they have to be careful on what they actually do inside the context of the piece. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing some older cast members come back. It's interesting, this is 30th anniversary. I went to see H20 in 1998, 1999, round about one of those. And I remember thinking, because Halloween came out the year before I was born, how it was so weird that this was 20 years. It was such a big deal. That series now, and it's heading towards its 60th anniversary. So this is 30 years, and it feels like less time than H20 was from the original Halloween. I enjoyed it. If you're a big Scream fan, it's a must-go and see. It's difficult to recommend for people who aren't, because it's a lot of the legacy anniversary type scope that they're going for here. Football, as I said earlier, got up for early football. Football on Sunday was really good. We beat top of the league. We've got the league in our hand. It was a very close game. The entire team played well. That was on the back of a Saturday team losing, but the Sunday game was the important one because it was against top of the league. We're playing them again next week. The way the fixtures have been smashed together, so, that's just the way things happen at the minute. But we beat top of the league. We potentially can join them at the top of the league next week with a game in hand if we beat them again, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. And so, this weekend coming is another important football match, but my son played absolutely just brilliantly part of the team. It wasn't an individual performance by any means. It was just a great team performance. AI. When the Horizon inquiry here in the UK, that's a post office scandal, was going on, I used to get an update at the end of each day from ChatGPT about what had happened during the day. These were long sessions, and it was difficult to follow everything about them, so I used to get an update. And that started me getting news from AI. I started doing it with the Ukraine conflict. Our current news cycle, even the best of it, is biased to a certain viewpoint, and it needs to be. That there's an audience it's broadcasting to, and so there's certain things that they're not willing to put on the news, but there's also items that they don't have the scope to cover. What I found with asking the right prompt and getting the right daily update with the Ukraine war was that I could say, what is globally the accepted news? So not just what the West is saying, what Britain is saying, what America is saying, which most of our news cycle is about, but globally, what is China saying about the war? What is Russia saying about the war? And getting a news cycle that says, this is globally, everyone agrees on this point, so this can be classed as verified because everyone is agreeing on it. This item is agreed by most Western, disagreed by Eastern news, and disagreed by Russia. This is Russia's version of this exact same story. Having that rounded, what's verified as in what everyone agrees, what's unverified as in a lot of news agencies such as Reuters are saying this, but there is some disagreement on other news agencies, I find really helpful to me outside of what we're fed through usual news channels. And outside of that, I have been using it to monitor technology news because that doesn't really come up in the same sort of way, especially due to automation. AI is really big in the news, but it's good just to have that when it goes out the news cycle in my feed. But also news such as what's happening in Myanmar. That doesn't get anywhere in the news. What's happening in Gaza? At the minute, the border between Gaza and Egypt has been closed again. Not getting reported in the news because we're now in that hyper-focused what's happening with Iran. And so some of the other bits fall by the wayside, which is the whole point about why some of these things happen, to distract from other news stories. Planes that were dropping bombs in Iran were coming back and dropping bombs on Gaza. That isn't being reported very widely. So I can get a more rounded news than I can from the usual sources. Does that make AI really good? No, because the first time I knew about this conflict in the Middle East was obviously through social media. But throughout the day, I was getting a mixture of actual news and AI generated news. Dubai got attacked at least 3 times before it actually had a verified attack on it, mostly through AI generated content. Some of which were very obvious, people standing in front of an explosion that just happened behind them, and other bits a lot less obvious. There were some interesting ones where the actual video had an explosion that happened just off camera and then people panned back to it, which was quite normal. This was verified. And then someone had took that content and put in a massive explosion and stabilized the camera to make it look like someone had filmed it. Other bits I've seen is shrapnel from a missile that got shot down that fired to the hotel in Dubai. Somebody had put a flying plane that looked like the plane had dropped the bomb onto the hotel. So AI, although it's given me the really good news feed, there's also the elements now that it is also being used to feed misinformation. And that's really difficult at a time when getting verified, up-to-date information on a fast-moving event is difficult. So AI isn't perfect on that front. And so there's positives and negatives connected with that. On the other side of positive and negatives is the fact that Russia has been using AI in the conflict against Ukraine, whether that's just experimental on some of the land drones they've been using, or whether that's more advanced than we knew already. And America, they're wanting to use AI in their military strategies and drone campaigns. And that's a massive risk moving forward. No one's seen Terminator. Where we're heading with that, I don't know. AI is being really useful to me for a news point of view. It's been really interesting to see how that's turned some of the news cycles, especially on social media. But when you start using it in military activities, that's a completely different kettle of fish. Today's been a quite different update from me. I appreciate that. Next week, we'll get more back to business. Hopefully, I can focus a bit more. The sunrise behind me has been absolutely fantastic. I am going off to networking. I might be slightly late. The beach has been busy this morning, so I've paused this video a few times to let people pass. So I'm going to networking. Have a great day. Hopefully, stay safe. A lot of us can have the opportunity to do that, but some of us aren't in that position. Right, have a good week. I will speak to you all soon. Bye for now.